I was really happy in, the last couple of decades being a part of this profession to see this become a focus that we were talking about. I mean, it's a personal focus of mine, but to see it actually come into the profession and start being discussed and being able to be here when it happened, is to me is a real treat. I feel, blessed to be a part of that. And so I share my travels. I love to travel. I love to see the world. Helps me to remember the bigger picture that I'm a part of.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Good CARMA Podcast. We're super excited today. We have a special guest from a special area in the country joining us today. And so I just wanted to welcome Chief Sarah Ryan from the Capitola Police Department. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Appreciate it. Well, right before the call, we were talking about the weather. Can you share with our listeners what the temperature is? And just to give perspective to our listeners, we're looking at 102 up here in Sacramento.
We are not. It's around the mid 70s, and I mean, I'm probably 2 blocks from the beach. So sorry, guys, but yeah, out my window, I'm watching people walk by with their beach chairs and their coolers and their dogs and their kids. So little beach town.
So nice.
Yeah.
So nice. When I retired from the sheriff's department up here in Sacramento, I went to Post to work as a law enforcement consultant. I was there for about 3 years. And so that statewide perspective opened my eyes to where I was like, why didn't I lateral mid-career or something to a beach city or something?
Yeah.
So I envy you.
Yeah. No, I mean, when, times get tough, I walk out and say, okay, look at where I am, It's pretty incredible. And it's a quaint, beautiful place. And there's a lot of people that make it that way.
Awesome. I love it. And just to give our listeners some perspective, if you haven't listened to the show before, this is the Good CARMA Podcast. CARMA stands for the California Affiliated Risk Management Authorities. And what we do is we provide excess coverage to law enforcement agencies that are under our purview, which are 136 agencies with approximately 5,000 officers, primarily in the Bay Area and the Central Valley here in California. We provide training, resources, support, and programs at no cost to our member agencies. So it's a pretty sweet deal. Our mission here is to help reduce large-scale payouts, even the smaller ones, because they add up and they negatively impact these risk pools, which has, a consequence to police budgets. And so it can impact training, hiring, retention, technology that you're looking to purchase. And that's problematic in the industry because what we've noticed, specifically since the George Floyd incident, is that lawsuits have quadrupled since, and they're still on the uptick. And so when you overlay that to what I just talked about and how it impacts police budgets, we're talking millions upon billions of dollars. And so, those who aren't in public safety, we are typically working with less and required to do more. So again, our overall mission is to help agencies with some of those challenges so that they can be successful and effectively serve their agencies. So with that, let's get down to the nitty gritty. I just wanted to ask Chief, to educate our listeners a little bit about who you are, where you're from, how you ended up getting into law enforcement. And then we'll talk a little bit about your roles and responsibilities, some of your assignments in your agency, and what led to your current role.
Sounds good. So I worked for the city of Capitola since 2004. And essentially, I've lived all over Santa Cruz County. So, I grew up in this area And traveling is one of my hobbies. So I've traveled all around the world, but this has been home for me. I just turned 50 back in January. So so that was fun. And it's an interesting place to be, but that'll probably become relevant at some point in our conversation, to be 50 and a chief, and what that mindset looks like in terms of, I'm an at-will employee now, right? It's the first time in my career I've been an at-will employee. So navigating decision-making and career stability and all of that, there's a lot of freedom in being 50. So I've been really enjoying that. So essentially I grew up in the area, went to San Jose State, got my bachelor's degree back in the 90s, in social work, knowing 100% that I did not want to be a social worker, but I had some sound advice at the time by somebody that was in the profession, in the law enforcement profession, that said, Sarah, do something other than public safety, because we're going to give you all that. You're going to get all that. Do something else that is going to broaden your perspective. So I thought, okay, this is what I'll do. And so, and then I started testing and made some decisions. I was really chasing money for a while there, back, kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s, being female. I'm being half Hispanic, half Irish. Like, I had, all these boxes I was checking for people. And did I want to chase money, or what did I want to do? And, really what it came down to is, serving locally. And I'm just happen to be one of those people that doesn't have a problem living where I serve. I know it's not for everybody, that level of accessibility. But that's really what it came down to for me. And so it was less about the money and more about my purposefulness. And quite honestly, growing up in this area, Capitola was an agency that was just a bunch of old white guys. So when they came after me, recruiting me really hard, it was really a privilege. I felt like it was a sign of times changing, and I felt very welcomed and supported with open arms. So I came into the profession, worked my way up. As a community service officer, I thought that was an important skill set that helped now in hindsight, learning all the different facets of the organization, working my way through the ranks. And in 2023, I started working on my master's degree, and I attended the University of San Diego and completed my degree in law enforcement leadership, which was a really useful program. Online school, in my place in life, was a little scary. It's not, I was from the time when you go and you sit in a seat and go to class. So it was a little bit different, having to navigate myself and professionally, but it was really key in order to having the academic work mirrored some of the things I was actually trying to do with my organization, like taking on automated license plate reader technology, standing up a chief advisory committee, a drone program. So there were things I was able to parlay into my education that became really useful for me several years ago. So I don't know if you had a couple questions embedded in that. Let me know where else I need to go with it.
Well, first of all, being half Hispanic, half Irish, we're very similar. I'm half Salvadoran, half Irish, and I got some Scot in there. So that's kind of cool little connection. And, I just realized that I didn't even introduce myself to our listeners. My name's Rob Patton. I'm a retired retired lieutenant from the Sacramento Sheriff's Office, and I worked at Post for a little bit afterwards before this current role. And our other host, Rob Kramer, who's the executive director of CARMA, is on vacation, so that's why he's not joining us today. But there are a couple of things that I was listening to as you were explaining yourself, and the first thing that stands out is your humility, because you didn't mention that you're the first woman in the history of the city of Capitola, and only the second woman in Santa Cruz County to be a police chief. So that in itself is a huge, admirable feat, because anyone who has worked in public service knows that it's a male-dominated industry. So to have the wherewithal and resiliency to achieve what you have achieved in your current role, to me, is amazing. So congratulations on that front.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And you talked about a mentor, as you were coming up, and those are so important to have those folks in our lives. And I was thinking about a gentleman I met in the post-executive development course by the name of Chief McManus. Are you familiar with him? Do you know him?
Yes, very much so. I mean, did you do your research and know that he has been one of my prior chiefs?
I did some sniffing around, but yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I had the privilege of working in my career because this is my home agency and I've stayed here my entire time. He was one of 5 chiefs that I worked for. And so he was two chiefs ago for me, and actually was very much a mentor of mine. I'm still in contact with him. We're very, very different, and that is really actually what I enjoyed about working under his leadership for the time that I did.
If you talk to him, please tell him I said hello. He left quite the impression. Very similar with regard to his humility. And, I think that attributes to maybe the culture that's going on over in Capitola. But yeah, I admired the way he, conducted himself at a professional level. So please tell him I said hello.
Oh, I will.
Yes. And so what experiences most shaped your leadership philosophy on your path to becoming a chief? You talked about your mentorship, the folks who helped mentor you. You talked about growing up in your community. But what other leadership philosophy or factors helped forge your path?
Well, that's a really a deep dive question that I've had to reflect on, because when I did take the position, and because, like you had mentioned earlier, being the first female, there was a lot of attention in interviews and a lot of questions that have caused me to reflect and ask myself those questions. How did I get here? Sometimes we just move through life and you just realize that you're somewhere and don't always reflect back on the things that help to, shape you. So, for me, what I have reflected on is, I think being an athlete was probably a huge thing for me. I was a competitive volleyball player all through high school and college, and that team mentality, it felt very natural to come into that environment in public safety. This isn't a job that you do alone. You need all of your partners at every level, sworn and unsworn. You need them all. I mean, our records team is often the most under-recognized but critically important team that we work with. It keeps us flowing and legitimate with all of the state requirements we have to respond to. So being an athlete was, I think, huge. That formed me. The competitors in there, and the adrenaline junkie, the person that enjoys the unpredictability of the work that we do, and sort of the comfort in that, in having to go play by play every day and to pivot and be flexible. So that's where the athletics ties in. And then, something that I've decided to really share, because it's very true for me. I was raised in the, late 80s, early 90s. And my mom, when my parents got divorced, my mom decided to become a lesbian. So I was raised with 2 moms, predominantly most of my life, and grew up very mainstream though. And, but it essentially started learning at a young age how to navigate having my family, a choice I didn't make, but I'm a part of this family, to be quote unquote other. And what does that look like moving through the world and having people make assumptions? Of course, it was the 90s too. So, HIV was on the rise. There was a lot of misunderstanding about that the world as it relates to that. So I think that really helped to start forming my mind of openness and hearing all different angles of perspective. And I also grew up, I had to, work my way through college and in the service industry. I mean, being a bartender was some of the best times of my life, but it really taught me about, oddly enough, de-escalation, customer service, and working at a fast pace. Everybody's emergency is your emergency when you're in, a fast moving environment in the service industry. So those things are all a part of, and many, many more. I mean, I'm the mother of a 24-year-old young man. So
yeah, that is a very interesting background that you have. Just being brought up with two moms, that's such an interesting perspective to have growing up, because it just opens up a whole new perspective to a worldview. So I can see how that could apply to law enforcement as far as having an open mind. And then, of course, working in the service industry prior to law enforcement, that's big. But what also stands out to me is your athletic background, because I have found in my career that athletes bring something a little special to the table. I don't want to say more special, because all officers are unique in their own way that fits into the cog of the overall mission of an agency. So we all have our roles, but those little nuances that athletes have with regard to teamwork, discipline, hard work, the experiences of winning and losing and how you deal with both of those things, that to me, helps pave the way for people like you in being successful in public safety. So good on you for that. That's awesome, man. And the sport was volleyball. Yeah. Good stuff. And what position did you play?
I was a setter. So I'm left-handed. So, and I'm 5'9", so I'm quite short apparently, because I tried to go, to some bigger schools and a lot of those women are, 6'1", 6'2". So according to volleyball, but, so I'm a left-handed setter. So I got to basically, play all the time and be the quarterback, because if you know anything about volleyball, the net's always on your right. So you have a lot of ability to work the net. I miss it.
Yeah. I bet you do, especially when a defender's eyes lights up and they see your left paw come up to spike one down.
Just want to make sure you had the visual.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Well, was there any specific defining moment where you realized that you were ready for law enforcement?
Really, through the initial process of, all that testing you have to go through, you have to do the dummy drag and the wall climb and being around the folks that were running those tests, and being able to visually just see. I was an outsider, but seeing the camaraderie and the structure, I knew that from that point, I wanted to be a part of that team. I didn't know yet what I was going to be exactly doing. It's hard to know until you're there and you're doing it. And as you guys know, the academy they do their best, but it's a sterile environment to try to prepare you for something that's pretty unpredictable, when you get out. But it does its part in terms of, at least giving you some exposure to, have an idea of what you're starting to walk into.
Absolutely. And, as far as leadership goes, in my mind, all problems are leadership problems. And so being the agency head, the top dog in your agency, you are the official legitimate leader in that agency. So there's a lot going on there. And my question is how do you balance being approachable with maintaining authority in a leadership role? And I ask that question only because you seem super personable, but as you know, in the industry, it can be intimidating when the boss comes walking through the halls, right? And so how do you maintain that your official role and your capacity while also being personable with the people that you do lead?
Good question, because it's a daily dance. Fortunately, through my career, and honestly, I'll say that this wasn't really planned out, but I happened to make decisions throughout my career that didn't keep me from being able to be on this leadership path, right? Because you can be on a promotional path, but at the end of the day, people may not accept you as a leader because they might know things about you that tick away at your credibility. on the job, off the job. I mean, we're paid risk takers, so you're coming from a risk management standpoint, that as paid risk takers, we are putting ourselves out there all the time, and the human condition is there with lots of flaws. And that police are not exempt from that, right? So balancing it really it's a daily, when I say daily dance, it's really reading the room and building the foundation of personability and that connectivity through the hiring process. That's really what I found as I've promoted up, is that's my opportunity to create that, the culture of accessibility, the feeling of accessibility. However, when they're then on board and they're going through the process of the rest of the hiring process, and then leading into field training programs and career building like that, I start to give some separation and find opportunities to insert myself when people have their guard down. I'll come into training days. Having lunch with the team is a great way, but knowing when to leave, knowing when to tip my hat and say, time for me to go. It's a balance, because every once in a while, that other side of me needs to show itself, the side that is, control, command, making sure that if we get off kilter a little bit with what our standards and what is the expectations are, that I never miss an opportunity to check people up and make sure, because everyone's watching. You're right. The big dog, right? It's all, it's funny, because promoting up within an agency that I've built my career in, at this point, there's only so many people left that I've worked with. Now, a lot of the people, I've hired them. And so they won't know me from those 3 a.m. talks on patrol or, running a call together. They won't know me like that. They'll only hear about me from whatever perspective they're provided. And so that also just sort of, kind of creates a natural balance as well of that, the mystery, behind who is she really, which is in some ways is a good thing. It really is a good thing.
It really is. And, just the takeaway that I just got from you was it's almost as if you have a built-in, decentralized command system where you empower your people to do what they need to do, as long as they know what those parameters are, what the expectations are, what the standard is. And it sounds like you let them run with whatever it is that they're working at. But when they brush up against those guardrails within the parameters, that's kind of when you step in and do your thing from a leadership role, right? Just to check in on folks, make sure they understand the mission, give them the opportunity to ask some questions, maybe for clarification, just so they're aligned with your vision, your mission, and your values. So yeah, that's a great environment.
And that's where it kind of ties into, the athletic portion of it, and, running a team, is that when you're running the plays and doing all of the things you do on a day-to-day basis, sometimes your doers aren't as connected to the vision and the mission, and they just need to be reminded where that tie-in is, and that it's still there. And gently, though, because micromanaging is one of my pet peeves. Trust people, and empower them, letting them know that they do make good decisions. We build them to make good decisions. And because when people are nervous and they don't believe in themselves, they're going to mess up. Things aren't going to go well. It's like when we see drivers. If nervous drivers are the worst drivers you'll ever see. They're dangerous. So we want people to start to get their confidence underneath them, and encourage them to go out and be the best version that they can be for themselves, and also to find their skill sets, because we cross-train everybody, but people get niches that they enjoy within this career. And I think it's really important to pick those out and to exploit them.
Absolutely. And you nailed it too, with just the Just take athletics, for example, right? If you don't understand the play or the culture within that team, or you're not that confident in your abilities, when it's game time, that stuff's going to show. So the same thing applies in policing. So I'm glad you talked about that. Sounds like a pretty legitimate environment to work in. Maybe I should get back in the business and drop my application. Just kidding.
Yeah. It's all good till you have to work all night long.
Exactly.
And I don't know how old you are, but that's a younger person's game.
It is. And I think I got you by 9 or 10 years. So, I'm out of my realm with that, moving forward. But, so let's talk a little bit about risk management and decision making. So, the question is what does risk management mean in a modern policing environment? To you.
To me, managing risk, for me at my level now, it's really important to be at all of the tables with all other city staff and other community groups, and to make sure that I maintain open communication. That's how I get to see the possible risks. If I isolate myself and don't engage, and just stay very law enforcement centric, I'll admit, I have done that before and been caught off guard. So I've learned through trial and error to really maintain a level of objectivity to keep conversations open so I don't miss anything. And I don't go into that sort of old school chief mentality of I said so, and then people just shut their mouth. They don't share with you. And that sharing, there's a lot said, in watching dynamics, and there's a lot said in even the silence of what people don't say. So, and as I navigate, flock, contentious topic, people, emotions get high, automated license plate reader technology in general, distrust of government. I mean, let's face it, our profession ebbs and flows in terms of popularity, depending on where people fall within whatever's happening in our world right now, who's sitting, and I don't get politically involved, but I need to be aware of it and aware of how that's impacting internally and externally, how that's affecting the officers that are serving here and the community that we're serving in. So really maintaining a level of connectivity with that, and hiring standards. I mean, I really pay attention to that because starting there, and I'm of the mindset that I'm more than happy to work short. I'm not going to change the hiring standards. That will pay on the back end if in fact we start doing that. And it's not always easy. Like I said, it's a pendulum. People want to do this work. People don't want to do this work. It kind of goes in this 5-year cycle from my point of view, what I've seen. So those are some of the things that are really important to me. I think I make our administrative captain crazy because I'm always, poking my head in his office with hiring standards and who do we have, what's going on. And if I was going to be micromanaging at all, that is where I'm really engaged. And unapologetically, really, because to me, the bigger picture, it pays off in the long run.
Frankly, I mean, I think that's potentially the tip of the spear with success within agencies is who you're hiring. So the fact that you are maybe a little bit management in that area, to me, it's totally justified because the stakes are so high. And then you talked about some of the groups that you're connected with. And what I've learned in this role, I've only been in this position for 3 years and some change, and it's new, right? Risk management, all this stuff. It's a whole new element. But CARMA has 5 underlying risk pools that fall under our purview. And your risk pool, you have 10 police agencies in your region. that belong to that pool, but you guys also have a police chief risk management committee. And what I found is that, in the risk pool world, when you have those types of groups where agency heads like yourself and members of your command staff can meet periodically and talk about, the risks associated to the industry, I think that's where, you get some really good information from your peers, and you maybe can get some ideas and then potentially implement them into your agency. So the hiring, huge. So, I'm happy to hear that, that you have that mindset and that approach. And then obviously being a part of your, risk management committee, makes sense to me. Next question is, this is kind of a broad one. I know you're at a super high level, but how do you train, or what would you like to see your officers do or prepare for those sound decision makings in critical moments under pressure when it really matters?
Well, I'm going to do the right thing. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to so what I want them to do, and this is going to go back into hiring and vetting people to come into this profession, is, I want them to, and we talk about this at the leadership level in this organization, in our command staff meetings that involve the sergeants, who are, we all know that's the most fun, the best position you could ever have in the leadership is to be a sergeant. I don't think anyone ever disagrees with that. Any leadership school I've ever gone to, hands down the best. So that, to me, like that group of gentlemen that's my ripe audience to talk about, emotional intelligence and the relevance of that, because I think that starts to really click in those critical moments, of tapping into very quickly at the blink of an eye, tapping into your strategy skills, your long range vision. If I do this, then that, what are these ramifications? And then tapping into that inner athlete of slowing down the heart rate and, really just taking a moment to, and talking about it. I think the more that we train and we discuss that, and that those fight or flight feelings that we love about the job, taking a moment to just take a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and just give it some thought, and then also from a training perspective, debriefs are highly important to me. I encourage them all the time, no matter how big, how small, whether it's a use of force type incident or even something that is maybe a little less exciting. Maybe it's even just a neighborhood complaint that got, all these stakeholders involved, that we really talk that out and come at it from a standpoint of training and learning and doing better. So, question's a little broad. If you want anything else, just let me know if you.
Yeah, answer was really good. I was at a 2-day leadership convention last week down in San Diego, and they were talking about the factors that you just mentioned: emotional intelligence and having that ability to detach from your emotions, perhaps in those critical moments, take a step back, right? Assess, maybe give it a little more thought. Check in with yourself before you start making those calls. And you talk about Sargentos and how they really impact outcomes in critical incidents. And my partner, Brian Rogers, and we have the ability to look at claims data that comes in. And it's amazing how it's those frontline leaders, those sergeants, who can impact the outcomes of these claims that are coming in. So, having that philosophy that you have, the debriefs was talked about at that conference last week that you just mentioned. That's where, right, the learning really starts to occur. It opens up different mindsets. So, That's good.
Yeah. And
That's
creating
really
the
good.
openness for people to really get into the debrief and be honest, because, let's face it. I mean, well, no one, I don't care what profession you're in, ever wants to look silly or step all over themselves publicly. And it's really hard to share feelings around something that you think, an incident that you think needs to be more technical. And so, doing our best to create an environment where that's open, but not too woo woo to the point where people are, wave you off and like, we don't want all that, Sarah. So finding that balance, cause I'm a yoga girl. So I'm all about balance.
My partner Brian's on the call. I know we heard you just mention yoga. I'm a yoga guy, and it's not too often where I come across another yoga person. So we got that connection going on.
Namaste.
I love it. All right. So, staying on the path of risk management, decision making, based on your experience, collective, what are the biggest liability traps agencies still fall in today? From your perspective, not to name agencies or call anybody out, but just, what you've observed.
What I have observed, liability wise, are internal cultural and claims that happen within an organization, where the culture is such that it can isolate people, and then you have internal claims that come back that have to do with internal dramas, essentially. And we all spend a lot of time together, and people tend to let their hair down. We've watched many quote unquote scandals through social media. Officers using their work cell phones for personal use, having attachments to things like that. We're living in a different world now, and we're needing to stay caught up with what that looks like. So, that's something that internally I just see that really on the rise with a lot of different organizations, that some of their, a lot of things that they navigate is actually internal complaints versus more of the external. We're going to face scrutiny. If you have a use of force, you bet you, like, people are going to sue. I think you mentioned at the beginning, that happens. And people look at it, they think we have these really deep pockets, when in fact, if they could only understand, they're hurting themselves, right? Because, it's like our PRAs, our public records request asks. It costs a lot of money to generate those. So when people think they're going to flood us with asks to create busy work, in fact, that money's coming from somewhere, with whether we will have to consult with attorneys and do all of that. So, so we know that, those things are going to happen. People are going to look at incidents on the back end and file claims, and we're going to need to battle that out. But some of the internal cultural issues, there's a lot of risk there. When you're setting up a culture that is what I would view not professional. At the end of the day, we have a job that requires us to be very intuitive with each other, and people get very close. They may not spend time together away from work, but they spend time together at work. But just to remember what those professional boundaries are.
Absolutely. I mean, you take just high school, college, and of course, professional sports. The expectations are so high to maintain that professionalism, because you're not just representing yourself, you're representing the team and the organization, the school, whatever it may be. And so, the value of relationships, I wish somebody would have came to me early in my career to talk more about that, because that's what helps build a solid bedrock of trust. And, as once you have that environment where trust is evident, relationships thrive. But it starts with the human connection and being relaxed and having a good time, but also know when it's game time, when it's professional time, right? Like, hey, we arrived at this call. Let's meet up real quick, brief what we have, talk about potential solutions. And then, right, it's your maybe a pre-force plan, when you're going to address a situation. And so everybody's aligned, debriefing afterwards, and then maintaining those professional relationships, where, people are just learning, growing, and getting better, which obviously helps the organization and, more importantly, the industry, because as you know, like you mentioned, somebody may do something back east or in the Midwest, and it affects everybody in policing across the country. So very insightful.
And our training records, until I was promoted to captain and then now into the chief's role, at a different point in my career, I was the training sergeant, and, just sort of, just going through the motions, not really understanding all of the relevance, but starting to build my understanding that I have now. And that has also saved us from a risk perspective. Training's been a huge push for me since I was a sergeant to now, creating a level of sustainability within our small organization, getting as many trainers, being able to self-sustain ourselves, which then we have a lot more experts within the organization that understand training and documentation and the relevance of it. Creating the culture of, if you develop a good case, you won't go to court as much, and really starting to hang on to that spills out into the leadership roles as well. When you line up your documentation and trust the process, of the process that you have in place, that it really does cover you. So when you have something happen, you can take a deep breath and go, I know that we have the appropriate attestations to say, we've trained on this, that will help us navigate through a high risk scrutiny.
Absolutely. And just as you're talking, I'm thinking of pursuit immunity training.
Yeah.
So, right? I mean, that just for our listeners, post requirements are that all officers train one time a year. It's only 1 hour training on driver's training, code 3 driving, all that good stuff. But that training is moot if there's no attestation, no documentation to support that everybody has had that training. So when you have an incident where there's a catastrophic outcome and, the attorneys get involved and they start pulling that thread back, if you don't have that, there's no immunity. And we've had cases that exceed, $10, $15 million. And you talked about, the perspective of citizens thinking we have deep pockets when it's time to sue a police agency. And that is not the case. And what I've learned is when a jury rules in favor of the plaintiff, and they are deciding what dollar amount to give the plaintiff, they're not realizing that it's their taxpayer dollars that are paying that bill. And that's part of what we're trying to educate people on. And so having that information out there is so important. And that leads me to my next question, Chief. And this one is very interesting to me. And it's in regards to the risk pool structure, lawsuits, payouts, where the money comes from, how it affects agency budgets and whatnot. And more times than not, I know I wasn't aware of all that coming through, really didn't pay much attention to it. And so why is it, do you think, that most officers don't understand that structure? And do you think that they should have some sort of insight into what that looks like as they're coming up in their career? Because they may end up being a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, or maybe even a chief. And what we've learned, Brian and I, over the last couple of years, is that even at the highest level in agencies, they don't understand that process. So can you talk a little bit about the educational piece on why officers aren't aware of that? Why do you think they're unaware? And do you think they should be aware?
I can. So it's interesting actually, because on one hand, information is burdensome, and we don't necessarily want your patrol level officer overthinking a situation, right? We want them to be strategic. However, we want them to react when they need to. And most of us have known that really smart police officer that's just too darn smart to be a police officer. We just need a doer. and they're going to be really great maybe as an administrator, but we're going to need them to lock it up with the intelligence a little bit, please. And so I think it's a really tender balance between oversharing, yet giving just enough so that they share just a little piece of the burden, just a little piece. And so for me, it is important that they understand it. It's sort of like me bringing the sergeants in to budget conversations. A lot of times this last cycle, they were like, why are you? Well, because you are a huge part of turning back to patrol when they want rocket launchers and, gold shoestrings, to talk about why that's a bad idea or why we're going to lead with a no on that one. And so getting people engaged in the part that's palatable for them at the level that they're at. And not overdoing it, because like I said, information is burdensome and we don't want it to make them incapable of functioning because they're just thinking too much about, chief said that if this and that and that, so just enough to understand the broader. And I think that's helpful in debrief situations. And doing those kind of debriefs even countywide, because when you talked about, part of your question was other leaders don't always understand. Well, it's hard to know what you don't know, right? It's hard to ask questions you didn't know you were supposed to ask. Unfortunately, there's not a, exact perfect book written what to expect when you're expecting to be a chief, and so, but having the humility to reach out to your partners. I mean, I'm really close with the chiefs within Santa Cruz County and the sheriff. We've come up together, and if we haven't come up together, the Watsonville Police Department has a new chief right now, and I sat on his hiring panel. And this guy's a rock star, and I made a point to say, I want to know you, and humbly learn, from your experiences, because we're not all knowing, and we're still a team. I'm just a part of a team that wears a little more gold on their collar, but I'm still a part of a team, So I think that, to answer your question, I think that it's important to share out at even the patrol level, but be very careful about what's palatable. And I think that it's subjective, because you need to know your team. You need to know what they're capable of. If I'm hiring a bunch of 24-year-olds to still live at home with mom and dad, I got to acknowledge that and what I'm dealing with, and what kind of burden can they bear. It's also interconnected. And when you're at the top, the hope is that you're paying attention to all those tentacles that you have out there, that you're touching base with them on a regular basis to make sure you're reading the room appropriately of what's going on in your organization.
Absolutely. Is Chief Zamora still at Watsonville? Is that who you're referring to? Or
no, he actually retired, and Chief Brian Shab, he came from San Jose Police Department.
Okay.
He took over, I want to say it might be just under a year now. It's not quite a year yet. So he's there now.
Okay. I only asked because Zamora, I went to some training with him back in the day.
He's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And then the San City Chief of Police, Dave Honda, he's also another one. He worked at Post with me just for a minute.
Dave Honda was the chief for Watsonville for a while as well. Another San Jose pick.
Correct. Prior to Zamora.
Correct. One chief, yes. Prior to Zamora. And Yeah, I mean, definitely Chief Honda, he's attached, like, like it's like a hermit crab that puts little thing, like he's on my shell, like I've learned from him through my career as well. Because he brought that, San Jose is not that far from us, but they're a much larger organization and has navigated some other challenges. So it's good to hear, from them what they've learned.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chief Borkin I've met over the last couple of years too out of Delray Oaks. He seems like a good person too. All right. So
I think he was the chief. He came down and had his e-bike and chained it to my chief parking sign where I parked my car, and sent me a photo saying, "Thanks for the parking spot." He chained his e-bike to it. I'm like, anytime. Thanks for visiting our beach. Spend lots of money.
Exactly. So you talked a little bit about sergeants and how significant they are, the roles that they play in leading during, critical incidents and just being available to officers and whatnot. And so, I just wanted to touch really quick on, a partnership we have with the Savage Training Group. We have some use of force, training for supervisors that has been received very well, through our partnership. And so we opted to bring it to your area. So that's on our website. It's coming, I believe, in October to, CSU Monterey Bay. So stand by on that. We've sent that information to your training manager. So hopefully they're disseminating it to folks in your agency, and it's at no cost. Plus we feed people who attend. So we're excited about that. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, wellness, because that's the other component that's equally as important, if not more, than the role of a sergeant. And so I just wanted to ask you, how are you addressing officer wellness and burnout within your agency?
And so we care about wellness. And yes. I was really happy in, the last couple of decades being a part of this profession to see this become a focus that we were talking about. I mean, it's a personal focus of mine, but to see it actually come into the profession and start being discussed and being able to be here when it happened, is to me is a real treat. I feel, blessed to be a part of that. And so, but I am also recognize that I have come from an older school culture of, you don't take time off work. What are you doing? Everyone's going to give you a hard time, right? And so I think it really starts at the top. And, I share my travels. I love to travel. I love to see the world. Helps me to remember the bigger picture that I'm a part of. And, so addressing officer wellness from that level of encouraging people, keeping track of their time, we'll talk about it during our command staff meetings when people need to burn time, and very mindful of when we're building out shifts. We will demand that people get the appropriate amount of time between shifts, because sometimes they want to chase that overtime train, right? And not understanding that that's, if they're building a budget, because that's another component of officer wellness, right? A lot of them come in and they're making the most money they've ever made in their lives, and they want to spend it all. They want all the trucks, all the toys, all the boats, all the things, so I've looked for opportunities to bring, financial advisors in and people just to talk and tell the story. Not everybody wants to listen. We're hard-headed as a culture. But so that because wellness is very much tied into that, right? The stress that we create in our own personal lives that then come into the workplace, and we pile it on and we think that we're invincible with it all. We can do all of the things. And, so creating an area where there's discussion around that, and then checking during our command staff meetings, I want people to report onto their teams, share what they feel like they can share from a peer standpoint without, violating any trust. I mean, if somebody doesn't want me to know that they're going through a divorce, that's totally fine. But just the fact that maybe they're going through something, that we can be mindful of how we're stacking up their shifts or how things are going for them without making it too obvious. But again, that's tentacles, that's paying attention. And I see that as part of my role to address that and to model it, to talk about people taking their time off and doing what they need to do and creating debriefs, making sure that they happen when they need to and in a time that they need to. It's critical. Yeah. And standing up internal peer support teams that are selected with the right people and making sure that if I hear any water cooler talk, that's addressed right away, because you only have one chance, and you break trust, and it's hard to get it back. So especially with our culture, right? We have a hard time trusting anyway. We got a lot that we feel like we need to protect. So, just taking all of those facets into account.
So it's like, I'm just thinking leadership capital. It aligns with what you're talking about with trust, right? If, you do something or you say something and you're not necessarily modeling the way like you suggested, which is so important, you're making a withdrawal from, that leadership bank. And so it takes so much more to put back into that bank to build your leadership capital. And so, like you said, being mindful is so important. And so we're winding down here. I just have a few more questions here to kind of rapid fire for some engagement, but just wanted to ask you really quick, what is in your opinion, the most underrated quality in a police officer?
Oh, emotional intelligence.
And why so?
I think that, unfortunately we still have this stigma of, cop wears big uniform, luggy person, all brawn, no brains, not understanding how many of these people are either academically or life lesson very intelligent. And that they're walking in with a whole amazing package of their own. I mean, we're not photocopies of each other, right? So they come in with all of that. And, I think that that's a hugely underrated, commodity that we have. And I think that that's what we're seeing with social media as a real big push to start trying to share that and get comfortable sharing that, what we call, the human that's in there. And, with all of that intelligence that comes through in that life experience. So I think that that's a really underrated quality, that the community just will sometimes dismiss, it's just a dumb cop. Like, oh no, there's so much in that package.
100%. You nailed it. The human nature, human side of policing, because we're not robots, right? So yes, you nailed it. And then another one is, what leadership lesson did you learn the hard way?
Oh, so many.
Well, just one that comes to mind. It doesn't have to be,
There's times in my career where I've absolutely followed the fail forward method, and that humility has been so powerful for me, in sitting back and not being reactive. And I'm pretty passionately, committed to outwardly and showing every day that I'm not punitive, in the sense that if there's something coming, and discipline is to correct behavior, right? And so if it has succeeded in that, then we're done and it's okay. And we're going to move forward. And so, but I think that, my experiences through my career and being a paid decision maker and sometimes having to fall on the sword, if you will, have been very valuable experiences for me, through this profession and through life. And another lesson is, it was told to me many chiefs ago, and as I think the only chief in California that's elected is the Santa Clara chief. Otherwise, we're appointed by the city manager and a city council, and right. And so, that doesn't require us to run for election. Therefore, staying politically aware, but not politically involved, and that keeping that component personal as it needs to be, because we're here for the people. And I really learned that back when we had storms in 2023 and President Biden came to town, and there were a lot of different feelings. Governor Newsom came to town twice, and it's everyone thinks it's really cool to have people at that level come to your town until you're doing it and you're realizing, wow, this is really hard. But it really taught me that. So sorry, that's a long version to that, but just I'm been so full of humility through life, and I there's so much value in it, so much.
I said it at the top of the hour, and I'm going to say it again. Your humility speaks volumes, and so for our listeners, I hope they can hang on to that one little nugget, because it can be challenging, and our egos can grow a little bit out of control. And it's because I believe that our egos love us so much that they can love you to death.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see that you're not like that. It's refreshing.
I've got some good people in my life that don't ever miss the opportunity to give me a little smack down now and then. So it's healthy. It's good.
It is very healthy. Okay. And one of the last questions here is, what advice would you give a young officer who someday might want to become a chief?
Oh, I've actually given this one. I've had people reach out to me that have wanted to test for sergeant. And I commend that, like skipping so many ranks and just go talk to a chief. Like it's actually, I never thought about doing that when I was testing for sergeant. So I think it's genius. But one of the things that I will say over and over again is be a bridge builder. You never know when things are going to come back around. So don't be the person that can't work with so-and-so, can't have so-and-so on their team. It's your job and your responsibility to rise above and find connectivity. And it's there. And sometimes it's exhausting to try to find it. But if you're not ready to take that on, then you're not really a bridge builder. And especially, if you want to start building your career, I look back now and literally all of the leaders that I'm leading with that are still here local, I worked with on the street. And that, if I had done it a different way, it would have been a lot more difficult to assume my position. And as you said, as the first female, being welcomed in the room, like all of these things have been tied into that. So some of my first advice is to be a bridge builder and to know that is your role in leadership.
Wise, right? A uniter, not a divider. And our final question for the interview is, if the public could better understand one thing about policing today, what would it be in your opinion?
I think what we're trying, actually, again, it's social media thing's pretty incredible. I'm learning from the 20 people in their 20s that we hire, but the complexity of it. I think that, I think we just did a post the other day, Technology Tuesday. I mean, the complexity of what it is now, and the level of, at least for California officers, our training and our the technology that we engage with that is accessible to people. So we don't have anything to hide. There is nothing to hide. We're always being filmed. We're filming ourselves. And so I think that people would relax if they really sat back and just asked the questions and came to walk with us for just a moment, just a couple hours of a shift, and be with us. I don't know about you all, but I typically won't make decisions about someone else's profession if I haven't at least sat there with them for a moment. And so for the public to really, if it,
So fitting. Siren in the
I
background.
planned that. Good job, guys. Nailed it. But yeah, I think so. I think, the complexity. I mean, it's distracted driving. Where our cars, you just get in there. There's computers, there's lights, there's this, there's that. I mean, you're in this little time machine, and, so I think it would be very helpful in so many different ways for the public to come and see the complexity of it all.
100%. Chief Ryan, we can't thank you enough for joining us on the Good Karma Podcast. Your wisdom, your knowledge, your humility, I hope goes far and settles in with some folks that are listening. And just wanted to say thank you for your time, and we appreciate everything you do, in working a career that's one of the hardest jobs in America. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was nice to see you guys both again, and thanks for the opportunity and for the insightful questions. They will sit with me because we just had this discussion out loud. So
Thanks again, Chief.
all right, thank you.
Take care. That's it for today's episode of the Good Karma Podcast. For more resources, training, and support, visit karmajpa.org. Be sure to follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube so you stay connected to new conversations. And as always, if this episode adds value, share it with your team.